What if everything you have been waiting for, the peace, the clarity, the version of yourself you keep promising you will become, was never waiting for a new year, a new city, a new relationship, or a new set of circumstances? What if it was waiting for a new day? Just one. Not a lifetime of discipline. Not a decade of transformation. Not the perfect conditions that never quite arrive. One day. Lived differently. Lived intentionally. Lived according to rules so ancient and so battle-tested that emperors and slaves alike have used them to build inner lives that the chaos of the world could not touch. That is what we are doing today on the Stoic path. And I want you to understand something before we go a single step further, because this matters more than anything else I will say in this conversation. The Stoics did not believe in waiting. They believed, with a ferocity that modern culture has almost entirely forgotten, that the present moment is the only moment of real power any human being ever possesses. Not yesterday, which is sealed and unreachable. Not tomorrow, which is promised to no one. But today. This morning. This hour. This breath. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, commander of armies, holder of more external power than almost any human being in history, did not begin each day by reviewing his empire. He began each day by reminding himself of something far more important. Who do I intend to be today? Not forever. Not for history. Not for the approval of the people watching. Today. And I want to offer you that same question right now, not as a motivational decoration for your wall, but as a genuine, serious, life-altering inquiry. Who do you intend to be today? Because the Stoic rules we are about to walk through are not abstract philosophy. They are not relics of a civilization that no longer exists. They are the most practical, immediately applicable, genuinely transformative framework for a single human day that has ever been articulated. And if you apply even half of what we cover today, just for these next 24 hours, something will shift. Not everything. Not all at once. But something. And something, as every great transformation in human history has proven, is always where everything begins. Rule 1, begin before the world demands you. There is a particular quality of morning that most people never experience. Not because it is rare. But because they sleep through it. It exists in the 30 to 60 minutes before the first notification, the first obligation, the first voice that isn't their own. It is a quality of silence that is not empty, it is full. Full of the person you actually are when no one is asking anything of you. Full of the thoughts that belong entirely to you before the day begins borrowing them for its own purposes. The Stoics called this time the morning preparation. And they treated it not as a luxury but as a necessity, the non-negotiable foundation upon which everything else in the day was built. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, described his morning practice with remarkable specificity. Before anything else, before the affairs of empire, before the councils and the campaigns and the endless demands of a world that needed him everywhere at once, he sat with himself. He reviewed his values. He prepared his mind for what the day would bring. He reminded himself, in his own words, of who he intended to be. Here is what this means in practice, and I want to be concrete, because vague inspiration is cheap. Beginning before the world demands you means this: the first thing you give your attention to in the morning should be chosen by you, not handed to you by an algorithm, not determined by whoever sent the most urgent message overnight, not decided by the anxiety that reaches for the phone before the eyes are fully open. You. Choosing. Deliberately. It could be silence. It could be writing. It could be movement that wakes the body with intention. It could be reading something that orients your mind toward wisdom rather than reactivity. It could be the simple, profound act of sitting in stillness long enough to remember what you actually value before the day begins competing for your attention. There was a man named Elias who had spent 15 years waking up already behind. His alarm went off and immediately, before his feet hit the floor, the phone was in his hand. Emails. News. The accumulated demands of a world that had been awake while he slept. By the time Elias arrived at his desk, he was already exhausted. Already reactive. Already 3 steps behind a day that had started without him. A colleague suggested something so simple it almost insulted him. Give yourself 30 minutes before you look at anything. Elias tried it once, skeptically, with low expectations. And discovered, for the first time in 15 years, what it felt like to arrive at his day rather than chase it. Within 2 weeks, those 30 minutes had become the most protected time in his schedule. Not because he had read a book about morning routines, but because the quality of everything that followed those 30 minutes was so measurably, undeniably different that giving them up became unthinkable. Begin before the world demands you. Just today. Just tomorrow morning. And notice what changes in everything that comes after. Rule 2, decide what the day is for. Most people move through their days on momentum rather than intention. They do what comes next. They respond to what arrives. They handle what demands handling. And at the end of the day, depleted, vaguely dissatisfied, uncertain of what exactly they accomplished despite having been busy every single hour, they go to sleep and prepare to do it again tomorrow. This is not living. This is being lived by your circumstances. The Stoics made a distinction that I want to give you with both hands, because it is one of the most clarifying ideas I have ever encountered. The distinction between preferred indifference and true goods. Preferred indifference are the things we spend most of our days pursuing: money, status, comfort, the approval of others, external achievements. The Stoics did not say these things are bad. They said they are preferred, meaning we reasonably want them, but indifferent, meaning they are not, in themselves, the source of genuine human flourishing. True goods are the things that actually constitute a well-lived human life: wisdom, justice, courage, self-control. The qualities of character that cannot be taken from you by circumstance, by other people, by the unpredictable weather of a world you do not control. What this means for your day is this. If you do not decide what your day is for, if you do not identify, before it begins, what true good you are going to practice and pursue today, then your day will be spent entirely in the realm of preferred indifference. Chasing. Reacting. Performing. Accumulating. Moving fast toward destinations that, when you arrive, feel surprisingly empty. A woman named Serena made one change to her mornings that restructured her entire relationship with time. Every day, before anything else, she wrote one sentence. Not a to-do list. Not a schedule. Not a set of goals. One sentence that answered this question: what kind of person do I intend to practice being today? Some days the sentence was, today I intend to practice patience with people who are moving slower than I want them to. Some days, today I intend to practice honesty even when the comfortable thing is to be vague. Some days simply, today I intend to practice being present rather than productive. What Serena discovered, over months of this practice, was that the days guided by that single sentence felt different from every other day. Not easier. Not without difficulty. But coherent. Purposeful. Like a day that meant something, that she had actually inhabited rather than simply survived. Decide what today is for. Not in terms of what you will accomplish. In terms of who you will practice being while you are accomplishing it. That single decision will change the texture of every hour that follows. Rule 3, meet every moment as it actually is. One of the most quietly devastating habits of the human mind is its extraordinary commitment to experiencing the present moment through the filter of the past or the anticipation of the future. We stand in the middle of our actual lives, the real, irreplaceable, happening right now moments of our actual existence, and we are somewhere else entirely. Replaying something that hurt us last week. Rehearsing a conversation that may never happen. Worrying about a future that exists only in our imagination and that, in all likelihood, will not resemble the disaster we are so faithfully preparing for. The Stoics had a name for this. They called it fantasia, the faculty of imagination, of mental representation. And they recognized it as both one of humanity's greatest gifts and one of its most reliable sources of suffering. Because the mind that can imagine anything, that can project into futures and revisit pasts with vivid, emotionally charged detail, is also the mind that can torture itself with things that are not happening. Things that happened once and are over. Things that may never happen at all. Epictetus said something that cuts right through this with the clean precision of a blade. Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life. This is not passive resignation. I want to be very clear about that, because this teaching is often misunderstood as a kind of defeated acceptance of whatever life brings. It is the opposite. Meeting every moment as it actually is requires more presence, more courage, more genuine engagement with reality than the alternative, which is simply to spend your life arguing with what is, in the privacy of your own mind, while the actual moment passes unnoticed and unengaged. There was a man named Patrick who received difficult medical news on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. The kind of news that rearranges the furniture of your life in an instant. He drove home in a state of such complete mental chaos, catastrophizing, spiraling, living 18 months into a future of worst-case scenarios, that he nearly ran 2 red lights and had to pull over and sit, engine running, in a parking lot for 40 minutes. And in that parking lot, in that enforced stillness, something shifted. He asked himself a question he had never thought to ask before. What is actually true right now? Not what might be true in 6 months. Not what was true before Tuesday. Right now, in this parking lot, in this body, in this moment, what is actually true? What was actually true was this: he was breathing. His hands were on the steering wheel. The engine was running. The afternoon light was coming through the windshield at a particular angle he had never noticed before. He was alive and present and here, in the only moment that had ever actually existed or ever would. He didn't solve his medical situation in that parking lot. But he came back to himself. And from himself, grounded, present, meeting the moment as it actually was rather than as his fear was constructing it, he was able to think. To plan. To take the next right step with clarity rather than panic. Meet today as it actually is. Not as you feared it would be. Not as you hoped it would be. Not through the distorting lens of yesterday's disappointments or tomorrow's uncertainties. As it is. Right now. This moment, met fully and honestly, is the only place where anything real has ever been built. Rule 4, do the difficult thing before you talk yourself out of it. The human capacity for self-persuasion is extraordinary. We are capable of constructing, in real time, an entirely convincing philosophical argument for why the thing we know we need to do today should actually be done tomorrow. Or next week. Or after things settle down. Or once we feel more ready. Or when the circumstances are slightly more favorable than they currently are. And the mind does this not out of malice but out of the biological imperative to conserve energy and avoid discomfort, impulses that served our ancestors extremely well on the savannah and serve us extremely poorly in the pursuit of a meaningful life. The Stoics understood this with merciless clarity. They did not believe in motivation as a prerequisite for action. They believed, and this is one of the most practically useful ideas in the entire Stoic framework, that action precedes motivation. That you do not wait to feel ready. You act. And the feeling of readiness, of capability, of momentum, follows the action. It does not precede it. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, in the private journals he never intended anyone to read, which makes them perhaps the most honest self-help document in human history, with a bluntness that is almost shocking. At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work, as a human being. Not as an emperor. Not as a philosopher. As a human being, whose work is to show up fully to the life they have been given. He wrote this to himself because he struggled. Because even the most powerful man in the Roman world had mornings where the bed was warm and the obligations were cold and everything in him wanted to delay the beginning. And he did it anyway. There was a woman named Amara who had been carrying a difficult conversation for 8 months. 8 months of knowing she needed to have it, with her business partner, about a pattern that was quietly destroying what they had built together. 8 months of almost picking up the phone. Of drafting messages and deleting them. Of telling herself she would do it when the timing was better. One morning she woke up and did something different. Before she made coffee. Before she checked her phone. Before she gave her mind the opportunity to construct its daily argument for postponement. She picked up the phone and made the call. The conversation was hard. It was uncomfortable. It did not go perfectly. But it was done. And in the hours that followed, hours that had previously been consumed by the weight of the undone thing, Amara felt something she had not felt in 8 months. Space. The difficult thing, once done, takes up no room at all. It is only the difficult thing undone that becomes a weight that occupies every room in your life simultaneously. Today, identify the thing you have been talking yourself out of. The conversation. The decision. The beginning. The ending. The honest word that has been living in your throat for longer than it should. Do it before your mind makes its argument. Do it before you feel ready. Do it now, while the intention is fresh and the resistance hasn't fully assembled. Rule 5, treat every person you encounter as a teacher. The Stoics believed in something they called sympathia, the interconnectedness of all things. The idea that every human being you encounter is not an obstacle or an irrelevance or a background character in the story of your life, but a mirror. A teacher. A source of something you need, if you are willing to look for it. This rule is the one that most radically transforms the social texture of a single day. Because the moment you decide, genuinely decide, as a practice rather than a platitude, to treat every person you encounter as someone from whom you can learn something, the entire quality of your attention changes. The difficult colleague stops being an obstacle and becomes a lesson in patience, or in understanding what wounds look like when they are wearing the costume of aggression. The stranger who is rude in traffic stops being an affront and becomes a reminder of what you look like when you are running late and overwhelmed and have forgotten that everyone around you is also human. The person who disagrees with you most forcefully stops being an enemy and becomes the sharpest available test of whether your ideas are actually as solid as you believe them to be. Marcus Aurelius wrote, about the people who frustrated and challenged and disappointed him, when you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. This sounds like pessimism. It is the opposite. He continues, but I have seen the beauty of good, and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own. He was not dismissing difficult people. He was preparing himself to meet them with wisdom rather than reaction, because he had already, in the morning, reminded himself of their humanity and of his own capacity to respond to it with something higher than frustration. Just today, in every interaction, no matter how small, ask yourself, what is this person teaching me right now? It will change everything about how you move through the hours. 5 rules. And we are only halfway through. A day that begins with intention rather than reaction. That is oriented around who you are becoming rather than what you are accumulating. That meets reality as it is rather than as fear constructs it. That does the hard things before resistance builds its case. That finds teachers in every encounter rather than obstacles. That is not a perfect day. It will still have difficulty. It will still have moments that test you, disappoint you, demand more than you feel you have. But it will be yours. Fully, consciously, deliberately yours. You made it to the second half. And before we go any further, I want to say something about that. Most people consume the beginning of things. The exciting part. The part where the idea is fresh and the energy is high and everything feels possible. But the second half, the part that requires you to stay when the initial momentum has settled, that is where the real work lives. That is where the people who are serious separate from the people who are merely interested. You are still here. That tells me something. Now let us finish what we started. 5 more rules. The ones that take a day that began with power and carry it, all the way through, to an ending that is worthy of the beginning. Rule 6, guard the quality of your thoughts like a sentinel at the gate. There is a city inside you. It has walls. It has gates. And through those gates, every single day, from the moment you open your eyes to the moment you close them, an endless stream of visitors arrives. Thoughts. Impressions. Other people's opinions. The noise of the culture. The commentary of the news. The judgments of people who do not know you. The fears that dress themselves up as reasonable concerns. The comparisons that present themselves as motivation but function as poison. Most people leave the gates unguarded. They allow everything in, indiscriminately, without examination, without asking whether this visitor deserves entry into the city of their mind. And then they wonder why the city feels chaotic. Why peace is so hard to find inside it. Why, after a full day of being busy, they feel not enriched but depleted, not fuller but somehow less. The Stoics placed the guardianship of the mind at the absolute center of their philosophy. Not as a peripheral practice but as the primary work of a human life. Epictetus, the man who began his existence as a slave and ended it as one of the most influential thinkers in Western history, taught that the only true freedom available to any human being is the freedom of the mind. External circumstances could be taken. Health could be taken. Relationships could be taken. Property could be taken. But the quality of your inner world, the thoughts you choose to dwell in, the impressions you choose to accept or reject, the narrative you choose to construct about your own life, that belonged, always and entirely, to you. He called this the prohairesis, the will, the faculty of choice, the sovereign decision-making capacity that no external force could touch without your permission. Here is what guarding the gate of your mind looks like in the ordinary texture of a single day. It looks like noticing, not suppressing, but noticing, when a thought arrives that is not serving you. The thought that tells you your efforts are meaningless. The thought that compares your chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 20 and finds you lacking. The thought that rehearses an old wound so vividly that the body responds as if the wound is happening now, today, in this moment, even though the moment that created it is years in the past. Noticing is not enough on its own. The Stoics did not teach suppression, they taught examination. When an unhelpful thought arrives at the gate, you do not simply pretend it isn't there. You look at it directly. You ask it the questions that dismantle its authority. Is this thought true? Is this thought useful? Does entertaining this thought move me toward the person I intend to be today, or away from them? Most of the thoughts that cause us the most suffering cannot survive honest examination. They rely on being accepted without question. The moment you turn the light of genuine inquiry on them, they lose their grip. There was a man named Lawrence who had spent the better part of a decade living inside a single thought that he had never once examined directly. The thought was this: I am not the kind of person things work out for. He didn't know where it came from. An accumulation, probably, of early disappointments, of comparisons that didn't favor him, of a family system that had, perhaps unintentionally, communicated that ambition was dangerous and hope was naive. But he had never questioned it. He had simply accepted it at the gate and allowed it to set up permanent residence in the city of his mind, where it quietly shaped every decision, every risk assessment, every relationship, every moment he came close to something he wanted and then found a reason to step back. One afternoon, in a conversation with a mentor he trusted, Lawrence said the thought out loud for the first time. I am not the kind of person things work out for. His mentor looked at him for a long moment and said, How do you know? Lawrence opened his mouth to answer. And realized, with a shock that rearranged something fundamental inside him, that he didn't. He had never tested the thought. He had only lived inside it, letting it make decisions on his behalf, letting it guard the gate in reverse, keeping opportunities out rather than keeping harmful thoughts in. Today, identify the thought that has been living rent-free in your mind the longest. The one that feels so familiar it has started to feel like a fact. Question it. Directly. Without mercy. Ask it how it knows what it claims to know. And then decide, consciously, sovereignly, as the guardian of your own city, whether it deserves to stay. Rule 7. Do one thing today with complete and total presence. We live in an age that has elevated busyness to a virtue and distraction to an art form. The person who is doing 6 things simultaneously is praised for their productivity. The person who sits with one thing, fully, unhurriedly, with their complete and undivided attention, is sometimes looked at with suspicion. Shouldn't you be doing more? Shouldn't you be moving faster? Isn't this a waste of time? It is not a waste of time. It is the only use of time that actually produces something of lasting value. The Stoics understood this in a way that modern productivity culture has almost entirely forgotten. They were not interested in the quantity of a life. They were interested in the quality of its individual moments, and they understood that quality is only ever available through presence. Through the complete, unhurried, full attention engagement with what is happening right now. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." 3 words. The most radical productivity advice ever given. Not because the past doesn't matter or the future doesn't require planning. But because the past is where the lesson lives, not where the living happens. And the future is where the intention points, not where the work gets done. The work gets done here. Now. In the quality of this moment's engagement. There was a master carpenter named Isidore who was known throughout his region for work of almost impossible quality. People who commissioned pieces from him described the experience of receiving them in almost devotional terms, as if the objects had been made by someone who was not merely skilled but somehow present in the wood in a way that other craftsmen were not. A young apprentice once asked him his secret. Isidore set down his tools and looked at the apprentice for a long moment before answering. "When I am sanding, I am only sanding. When I am joining, I am only joining. When I am finishing, I am only finishing. I do not sand while thinking about the joining. I do not join while worrying about the finishing. I am only ever where I am." The apprentice wrote it down thinking it was a technique. It took him 15 years to understand that it was a philosophy. Today, choose one thing. One conversation, one task, one piece of work, one moment with a person you love. And give it something that has become almost revolutionary in its rarity. Your complete and total presence. Not your divided attention. Not the performance of engagement while your mind is somewhere else. Your actual, full, unpartitioned self, here, in this thing, in this moment, with nothing held back and nothing else competing. Notice what that produces. Notice the quality of what gets made, in the work, in the relationship, in the interior experience of the person doing it, when presence is not a luxury but a practice. Rule 8, let go of the outcome, own the effort. This rule is one that will feel counterintuitive to almost everyone raised in a culture that measures value almost exclusively by results. We are outcome obsessed. Did you win? Did you succeed? Did the numbers go up? Did the relationship work out? Did the plan produce what the plan was supposed to produce? And when the outcome doesn't materialize, or materializes differently than we needed it to, we do not just feel disappointed. We feel like we have failed at something fundamental. Like the gap between the intended outcome and the actual result is not just a data point about circumstances, but a verdict about our worth. The Stoics would look at this with something close to compassion, and something close to alarm. Because they understood something about outcomes that our culture has almost entirely lost sight of. Outcomes are not entirely in your control. Not ever. Not fully. Not even with the best preparation, the clearest intention, the most disciplined execution. The marketplace changes. The relationship involves another person with their own will and their own wounds and their own unpredictable response to reality. The body does what bodies do, independent of what the mind instructs. The weather comes. The timing shifts. The variable you didn't account for reveals itself at the worst possible moment. What is in your control, always, completely, exclusively, is the quality of your effort. The Stoics called this the reserve clause. The practice of pursuing every goal with full commitment and full energy, and then releasing the outcome with full equanimity. Not as a failure of ambition. As a recognition of reality. Epictetus put it with characteristic precision: make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens. A woman named Fatima had spent 3 years building a business with everything she had. Every resource. Every hour. Every piece of creative and strategic and emotional capacity she possessed. She was, by any honest assessment, doing extraordinary work. And then a set of circumstances entirely beyond her control dismantled the market she had built her business in. The business failed. In the months that followed, Fatima did something that surprised the people watching her. She did not fall apart. She did not collapse into the bitterness or the despair that the circumstances seemed to justify. She was sad, genuinely, honestly sad. She grieved the loss fully and without pretense. But she was not destroyed. Because somewhere in the 3 years of building, Fatima had internalized something that protected her from the particular devastation of conflating effort with outcome. She knew, at a cellular level, that she had given everything that was in her power to give. That the effort had been real, had been worthy, had been hers in a way that the outcome, which the effort remained. It had built her. It had sharpened her. It had proven things about her character and her capacity that no successful outcome could have proven as clearly as the failed one did. She rebuilt. Differently.